Hello, good afternoon. You're welcome to Agenda on TV3. My name is Deborah Kwabla. After 60 years of political independence, Ghana is still struggling to deal with waste disposal, recycling, and collection. What is the issue? Why are we seem to be doing so slowly when it comes to these issues? Is sanitation situation in Ghana a disaster or a challenge? That's what we are discussing today on Agenda. With me in the studio to do the discussion from far left, we have Mr. David Duncan, he's Chief of WASH, UNICEF. In the middle, we have Dr. Eric Chum. He's a chartered environmental consultant. And on my immediate left, we have Mr. Anthony Mensah. He's a Director of Waste Management, Accra Metropolitan Assembly. Welcome, gentlemen, to Agenda. We'll start with you, Duncan. 1 year on, last year, I remember around the same time, we had a discussion around sanitation and all that. What has changed?
Good afternoon, Debbie. Not enough has changed, I think is the simple answer to that question. We have seen very, very small changes in terms of sanitation coverage. A few more houses do have toilets. A few more schools have toilets. But at this point in time, we're not seeing the massive change in approach that we need across the country to really make a difference, and frankly, for Ghana to fix the problem. We've seen a few exciting developments recently, and the ministers or the president's launch last week of the National Sanitation Campaign it's a really positive move.
But in 2014, we launched a national sanitation campaign, and we're cleaning once every month. And so this is not the first attempt at establishing something. So what makes this very different? Is it because it's going to be every day?
It's partly because it's going to be every day. It's partly because, yes, with the National Sanitation Day, there was a movement forward. But cleaning gutters doesn't build toilets in a very simple way. We did a lot of good things, and I'm not diminishing the value of many of the things that were done, but it wasn't about building toilets. And in reality, in terms of saving people's lives, in terms of improving their health, in terms of improving the economic situation for the poorest householders, we must be getting more people living with their own household toilets.
Welcome to you, Mr. Mensah. AMA, and you are waste you manage waste within the Accra Metropolitan Assembly, and we seem to be making very slow progress. What's the issue?
That is true. I will start by touching on what David said earlier on. The progress has been very slow, and the pace actually needs to be astronomically increased. Otherwise, we will not be able to win the battle. But then, talking about the campaign that was launched last week by His Excellency the President, I think it's a step in the right direction. There has been some attempts in the past, but then what I would say is that in the past, sanitation had been treated based on part-time approaches. I say so because we had the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development having that mandate. And that ministry has so many responsibilities. So if that ministry is responsible for sanitation through the municipalities, then certainly that ministry needed a technical hub within the ministry that would then formulate the policies, and then also that would serve as the engine room from which the strategies will be developed and then go down to the municipalities for implementation.
Is it a policy strategy issue, or is inability to collect and dispose of waste and do what is right?
Not just that. I'm talking about part-time in the sense that the ministry has so many responsibilities. Therefore, the time and attention devoted to sanitation was not adequate. But then, what the current campaign is seeking to do is supported by the creation of a dedicated Ministry of Sanitation, which has two broad mandates. One is water, the other one is sanitation. So the ministry has got to deliver on the water and then also on the sanitation as well. So having this dedicated ministry places sanitation on the high pedestal this time around. it is now on the radar, and everybody is watching to see sanitation improve.
And to see the ministry succeed. Well,
I hope so, yes.
Dr. Twum, what do you feel? We are making very slow progress. Do we need a ministry? Do we need new policies? Do we need new guidelines to deal with the issues of sanitation? Because we know what to do. We know what the problem is.
I'll start off by saying we know what the problem is and we know what to do. So the question is, why are we not doing it? I mean, the statistics is very glaring. 1.6% of our GDP lost through sanitation issues. We have a problem which is systemic, that needs a much more systemic approach to deal with it, and a holistic approach. What we have noticed over the years are isolated programs that tend to deal with the issue of sanitation. Now, we are told we're going to have a national sanitation authority that will oversee the issue of sanitation. That is a bold attempt, but the fundamental problems have not been resolved. The first has to do with the attitude of the Ghanaian, the behavior of the Ghanaian. We need to deal with that very, very critically. We need to let people understand the implications of their actions when it comes to sanitation. Now, the issue about population, Ghana's population has grown astronomically, and unfortunately, we have not dealt with the issue of sanitation as our population also increased. Then there is also a problem with access to sanitation facilities. We should look at the issue of sanitation from a much more value chain approach, where from the issue of the creation, the collection of the waste, the transport of the waste, the recycling of the waste, and the reuse of the waste. All these value chain, we need to address them systematically, instead of just tackling only one aspect of these. And over the years, does
this value chain approach justify the creation of a ministry, for instance, for a ministry to see to the whole value chain?
No, what the creation of the ministry shows the government's new approach towards dealing with the situation. That means there should be a one-stop center that oversees all this, which is a very good attempt in addressing the issue about sanitation in the country. I mean, what we need to look at again is the issue about financing. We need to look at what the problem is and find solutions to them. How do we deal with the financing situation about sanitation? How do we deal with the information that is generated? How do we run with it? And again, issue about technology. There are technological advances in dealing with waste. How far as a country are we at pace with the advances in technology in dealing with waste? In a country like Sweden, where only 1% of the waste goes to landfill, right? And the waste generated in the country is not even enough for recycling and creating energy. So what are we doing as a country in terms of our waste? The waste situation and sanitation provides a business opportunity for the country. We have not dealt with the models and the financial mechanism that will attract private, public sector involvement in dealing with the waste. Once we appreciate the enormity of the problem, that 1.6% of our GDP is lost through sanitation and waste. But however, there's a silver lining. There's a business case to look into sanitation and addressing it. Once we identify and look at it that way, then of course we attract the needed investment. And then issue about getting the CSOs and then the National Commission on Civic Education to actually sensitize the citizenry about the importance of keeping the best of environments and sanitation, then of course we're making progress. But if we have an isolated case that deals with only one aspect of sanitation but not have the whole value chain addressed, then of course we'll still be marking time.
The issue of sanitation is very critical because apart from GDP that is lost, our health bill also goes up. And of course, the quality of life for Ghanaians is also an issue. And so this is one that we should critically focus on. You've been a stakeholder in this wash for many years. What's your understanding of the real issue? We know he's mentioned behavioral change, financing and all that. But what is the underlying issue? Because any government would want to deal with an issue like this.
I think I'd like to thank my fellow panelists. There's some good ideas there. But the biggest problem in terms of toilets in Ghana is actually the rural area. The highest ratio of people who do not have toilets is far and away the rural area. And people living in urban areas, there's 1 in 16 of them don't have access to and some sort of toilet, a public toilet, a shared toilet, or some sort of facility. If you go up into the 3 regions in the north, though in those areas, 50 to 70% of people, so in more than 2 out of 3 people in some of those, in 2 of those regions, don't have access to a toilet, and they're in poor rural communities. The value chain won't help those people at all. There is no value chain in a toilet for a community, for a household that lives in the middle of the rural areas. So the real challenge for me is that looking at strategies that really empower those communities to help solve their own problems. These are people who have been solving problems on the land for generations. We know that when we get in there and we provide some very simple support, not monetary support, but just technical advice on simple things they can do, they make those changes. And just this year alone has seen about 250,000 people make those changes across all of the programming in the country and build toilets for themselves. That's a massive number. And there hasn't been money going into those households. There hasn't been a high technology solution. These are often very simple, very basic toilets. But it's changed the lives of about 250,000 people, 250,000 individuals, whose lives are completely changed. They're going to be healthier. They're going to spend more time working on their crops or working on their business. Their children will be healthier, so they can spend more time working on their crops or working on their business. And the children are going to be able to go to school more. So all those things together are very, very simple solutions that can provide much of the solution for the country. I think, yes, when we get into the urban areas, we do have to look at different technology solutions. We do have to look at the value chain. But I think it's critical we don't forget the rural area where the biggest problems are. And we really support those strongly. And that support, the support that's required is simple, it's actually very cheap, and it's incredibly effective when we get out and do it.
So, Mr. Minister, AMA, we see you collecting refuse in the city, but every time we see the heap, we know we have disposal issues. We've done many programs in the past. We had the monthly cleanup exercise. Now we have the daily campaign. How do we position this new campaign so that we are successful? Because otherwise, it's going to be another launch, beautiful speeches, and then very little results.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes. There are a number of challenges, as you rightly said, and this time around there is a positive resolution to make sure we succeed. Specifically talking about AMA, we have put a number of strategies in place, and over the past 3 months or so, waste collection has improved significantly. What we've done is to optimize based on the limited resources that we do have, trying to eliminate inefficiencies, and then trying to do the best we can with the limited resources. And this has yielded a lot of significant improvement. For example, there used to be a lot of heaps, minor heaps within the communities, about 40 or more. As I speak now, we've been able to clear all those. We've also introduced what we call sanitation rapid response team to respond to indiscriminate disposal of waste within the communities. We've also introduced task forces within the sub-metros to deal with this same indiscriminate disposal of waste. We've also introduced some schemes to deal with difficult areas that we were having, for example, in the market areas where refuse collection was a big challenge. The market operators were not paying, and we have managed to introduce some models to address the challenges within these market areas, and then also trying to let our waste collection contractors do their best, that is to improve upon their service delivery within the communities. And these have resulted in a lot of improvements. The challenges that we have been having has to do with disposal facilities. And unfortunately, within the Accra boundaries, that is AMA, we don't have any disposal facility at all. So we have to go outside of AMA to access these facilities. At the moment, we are going to Tema for our waste disposal. And sending waste from within AMA far away to Tema, considering the traffic situation and other challenges, makes the service delivery highly inefficient. We also had to introduce what we call transfer stations within strategic locations, so that once the waste is collected, we can send them over short distances to these transfer facilities. Then it's converted into larger volume for onward haulage to the final disposal site. These together have brought a lot of improvements, but then it is not enough. Considering the President's declaration of making Accra the cleanest city in Africa, certainly this kind of approach, we have optimized fine, we have made a lot of strides, but we need to get massive injection of resources into the system for us to be able to respond to this call to making Accra the cleanest city in Africa.
One challenge that we have is where people do business and where people trade. You see people, especially within the metros and the city centers, selling at places that are not designated for selling. And once you have people living in a certain area, they generate waste and all that. So if we start dealing with the collection and the disposal and we don't deal with the fundamental root cause issues, how do we fix and make sure this is sustainable? How are you dealing with the underlying issues so that we have a sustainable success, if you like?
Yes. In fact, we needed to start something, trying to clean up after us and when they create the waste. Now we are pausing. Of course, we'll continue with the cleaning, and then we are now going after those traders and hawkers who operate within illegal locations. For example, on the pavement and also within the middle of the road.
Well,
in certain locations.
This is an old issue. We do it all the time.
We have to do that.
We get the people off the streets, and then within weeks,
we have to
back.
do that and sustain it. Otherwise, we are joking.
We've been doing this for years. Dr. Chum, how do you feel about this issue?
I'm happy we are looking at it again. What we are missing is innovation. What are we doing differently? What needs to be done differently? Because at the heart of all the policy documents that we have not addressed the issue about sustainability and efficacy of these policies and regulations. I mean, how many individuals, persons, have we actually arrested and put before the courts? Issue about naming and shaming individuals, companies who have flouted the laws. I mean, how well have we done with issue about regulation and enforcement? We hear cases, isolated cases, but there has to be a paradigm shift that has a drastic and dramatic change before we can see the change we're looking out for. And the case we have in Ghana is so peculiar and unique. To have a tag of being the 7th dirtiest country in the world, and yet we are
the gateway to Africa.
The gateway to Africa. This is simply unacceptable. That calls for dramatic change in attitude, approach, everything. That also requires, and I want to mention the word innovation. We are not being innovative in addressing very simple things. Like Duncan rightly said, we need to do some very, very simple things to bring change. It is not, we are not looking for a whip and a cutlass or a military on the streets for us to see this change. They are very, very simple, basic things that we need to do.
What is it with us? Yesterday, in fact, you cycle a lot. You see people holding canes, trying to whip people into line. It's as if signage that says, don't stop here, don't pick passengers here, just doesn't work for us. We needed people to hold canes to actually whip people in line. What is it with us that we keep dropping refuse on the streets, even though we know what it does for us?
I think we have not made the case of making examples and getting people to actually pay for their crimes. And again, the political will to get it done. Let me just shift that a little bit to the sanity that in 2007-2008 we had with the arresting taxi drivers and trotro drivers who were driving carelessly in the streets. We had a fast-track court that processed them very quickly and set an example. You know, people said there were political ramifications for that. So we don't have the political will to take the bull by the horn. And that, for as a country, is the problem.
And until we fix it.
Until we fix it, unfortunately, it's still be Markentine.
Duncan, today is World Toilet Day, and I know you're very interested in the issues of toilets and toilet facilities for families and all that. Today is exactly the day, and we need to bring awareness to this. How important is this celebration, and what do we need to do different? I know you talked about simple things for rural communities and all that.
And thanks, Debbie. There's a few questions there. It's a critical point. And every year, 3,600 children, Ghanaian children, die from simple diarrhea. And we know that poor sanitation, and specifically access to toilets, is a major factor in that. If we could fix the toilets, we could save thousands of Ghanaian children every single year. So for me, it's beyond important. It's absolutely critical that we fix it. And the point that was just raised, I think actually goes a long way to it. We need to change what is normal in Ghana. At the moment, for many people, using a toilet's not normal. Going and finding a gutter, going and finding a bush is normal. And when you go into many of the rural communities, we speak to them and they say, we've been doing this for generations. For this is what we do.
Sometimes it's difficult to lead disease, sanitation and all that to not having access to toilets. Yeah. I don't know whether that's the disconnect for us. Because
it is a disconnect. And in all honesty, in the programs when we go into those communities, often it's not about making that links. It's helping people make the realization themselves. And I think we all know that if someone comes and preaches to you, your first reaction is to step back and, okay, well, let me think about this. So the approach is to helping people understand and change what is normal has to be a self-realization. We all know that if we make a decision, I don't like this, I want to change this, that's far more powerful than somebody coming to you and say, you must change. And so the thinking now is when we go into communities, it's all about asking questions. How do you do this? How do you defecate? And then asking, well, are you happy with that? Are you happy that when you map out where your whole community defecates, it actually works out that's where your children play. You might go there and your children might go there, but when you look at the whole community, you can't hide. And so just asking, well, are you really happy with that? And then when your children come back into the house, do they wash their hands? Do they wash their feet? And the answer is usually no. Well, are you happy with that? They've been out playing in amongst all of this. And so it's helping people come to a realization, actually, we're not happy with this. And we want to change it. It's about changing what is normal. It works with litter management. It works with toilets. If, for me, littering is normal, I throw things away. If it's not, even if no one is watching, even if there's no penalty, I don't just throw it into the ground. And it's exactly the same with a toilet. If, for me, using a toilet is normal, even if I don't have one, if there's a fire, if there's a flood, if I'm looking to rent a house, I want a toilet.
You want a toilet.
And so it's about making that change, helping people make the change to say, I want a toilet, I need a toilet. And again, for my colleagues who are talking, I think, more about waste. It's the same thing. It's, I don't want a litter. It matters to me that I don't throw this on the ground. And then it doesn't matter who is watching, I won't throw it on the ground.
So we need to do that change. We'll go for a break. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion. We're looking at sanitation in Ghana. Is it a challenge or is a disaster that we're living with? We'll be back after the break. Hello, you're welcome back. This is still Agenda on TV3. We are looking at the sanitary situation in Ghana, whether it's a disaster or it's a challenge that we can deal with. And my guests are still here. Mr. Mensah, today is World Sanitation Day and World Toilet Day, sorry. And AMA is a big metro. What are you celebrating the day with? What awareness and what are we doing to make sure that within the metropolis people have access and use their toilets right?
Thank you very much. We have an intervention which is ongoing. We call it the Gamma Sanitation and Water Project. It has been running for the past 3 years or so. And the focus is on the provision of household toilets for various homes. And this particular day, all the 11 municipalities involved within the Gamma area are at various social gatherings. Some are in churches, some went to the mosque. Today is not an Islamic day though. some are at various social gatherings, funerals, what have you, weddings, to go and propagate the good news. The good news is that these toilets are being provided at half price to the beneficiaries. They are supposed to pay just 50% of the cost, and it is built for them.
Last year we looked at the 50% of that cost, and it doesn't look like it's cheap. How much is the 50%? And how is community members responding to that 50%?
The campaign has been intensified, and that has led to some significant subscription as I speak now. And we are also introducing mass production. We've just gone through a procurement process to procure service providers who are going to put up toilets in hundreds and 200s and even in thousands. And having reached that stage, we are hoping that we'll be able to increase the acceleration of the provision of the toilet facilities. So colleagues are all over the place trying to propagate, and we are expecting that it will lead to a lot of very high subscription.
How are we dealing with pit latrines in AMA?
Pit latrines are not allowed in AMA because we know that if you look at the joint monitoring program that David's organization is part of, pit latrines are not allowed.
We know that, but do we still have pit latrines in AMA?
There are a few. I cannot put my finger to the numbers. What we are constructing under the Gamma project are septic tanks, and then also biodigester system of treatment. And these are what we are promoting. Pit latrines are not part of it.
So what do we have some timelines to deal with the pit latrine situation in AMA? Because fact, we know that there's still
it has already been banned. Pit latrines, bucket latrines, they are not allowed in Accra. So the environmental health officers have been going around to look out for people who are still holding on to these systems of toilet facilities and then dealing with them accordingly. We have revised our bylaws to bring on board a lot of current trends, and we have taken it through the processes. It has been sent to the Attorney General's department for their comments, and then it is back to us. We are now taking it through the assembly structures for the final approval. And provisions are there to check all these things. And we are going to enhance our law enforcement activities once the approval is complete. Even before we get there, we have started with the existing bylaws to try and do the right thing and get people to do the right thing. So we are doing a lot, and it's our hope that things will change for the better. But having said that, I will still say that it is still not enough, because if you look at the Gamma, our target is 20,000 toilet facilities, and the project is ending around 2020. And if you look at the deficit, 20,000 certainly is not adequate.
And how many have you done so far?
So far, we've done around 2,000, just under 2,000. I must say.
Is it realistic? Are you going to achieve this target?
With
20,000, and we have how many years to go?
We have about less than that. We are in 2017 now, about 3 years. With the mass production, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to meet the target.
18,000 in less than 3 years.
I'm hopeful.
We'll keep an eye on that. But Dr. Twum, please go ahead.
Yeah, we were using what we call the sub-project implementers, SPIs. We were building in 10s and 5s, and in that order. But now that we are resorting to this mass production, one entity is expected to be given up to about 500 facilities to build within a very short time.
Is the demand there?
Is
demand there, or you're
yes,
just
now the demand
the supply,
has gone very high. The demand has gone very high. A lot of people have paid, expecting the construction to be made for them. And because the capacity to build was a little bit lacking, with this mass production coming on stream, we are going to be able to deliver.
Doc, we still have open defecation in Accra. You go to our beaches and it's complete eyesore. You go to rural communities, go to the farms, open defecation is still very, very high, and it's a challenge that we need to deal with. How do we position dealing with open defecation and highlighting the World Toilets Day?
I think as a country, we have made some efforts in dealing with this, but it has not been very successful. Simply because we've not had the punitive measures that are biting enough to deter people from continuing with the whole program. We have a government policy now that talks about one household, one toilet. Now, I hope that the government will understand that we have moved from the era of campaigning and elections to implementation. Now, if they see the opportunity in this and implement it, then perhaps we might make some. I'm making reference to that because we need some political will as a country to fight this. It's an eyesore, and it is quite shameful when you attend certain international programs and they say, oh yes, you're from Ghana. They wonder, are you part of the guys who actually encourage open defecation or not? And the statistics that have been given us, about 20,000 being the target to 2020, and we only have 2,000.
We've done 2,000.
Which is just...
And we have less than 3 years to go.
Which is less than 10% of that. We need to ask ourselves, what can we do differently from the business as usual approach that we have? What can we do?
And even the 20,000 is not going to fix the deficits.
No. Exactly. So what can we do differently? We need generational thinkers, people who think differently outside the box, who actually have solutions for our generation, and allow people to come in with different ideas, have open forum to discuss this issue from a more holistic approach. I've mentioned here today that we need to have a proper systems approach in dealing with this, because until we have the systems approach in dealing with this in a holistic manner, we will still be in the same position come 2020. And looking at even the Sustainable Development Goals that Ghana has signed up to, the issue about sanitation is key. But in terms of performance, even the Millennium Development Goals, we perform very, very, very poorly. You see, for the past 25 years, in terms of sanitation and even toilets and all that we need to do, only 1% gain for 25 years. So are we going to go every 25 years to have 1% increase and improvement as a country or not? So this really calls for a proper, this is a national crisis. It calls for proper thinking of our leadership and the citizenry to appreciate the difficulty and the problem we have as a country, and then deal with this issue about open defecation.
It's a shame.
It is.
It is a big shame, especially if you are asked out there whether open defecation still exists in Ghana. That would be very embarrassing. David, the issue of separation of waste is very critical, because we know that waste can be used to generate many, many other things, even sewage waste. I mean, if we collect and we channel them through the right places, we could get a lot out of this. How do we approach the issue of separation from a behavioral perspective?
From a behavioral perspective, it's the same sort of approach that we approach all of this. We have to look at what are the key drivers that are making people behave in the way they're behaving. For waste management, for toilets, for whatever, it may differ from issue to issue. And then it's a matter of identifying across the community who are the key people who will help change that opinion. And then identify messages and approaches that are going to get in there. So religious leaders, commonly in Ghana, are one of those mechanisms. Traditional leaders is another mechanism. Within urban areas, the assemblymen and assemblywomen are another mechanism. The regulation is another factor, but we know from everything that's been done elsewhere that if we just rely on regulation, the moment the regulation stops or people don't think they're being watched, their behaviour reverts. So we need to do a lot more than just regulation if we're going to change the way people behave. It's the issue I talked about earlier. It's about changing what people think is normal, because if for individuals, if separation of waste, if using a toilet is normal, that's what they will do. They will find a way. And if it's not, We can impose penalties, we can put all sorts of restrictions on it, we can be regulatory, but fundamentally you won't change how people behave the moment you're not watching them, the moment you lift all those sanctions, the moment they think they can get away with it. So it is about changing who influences me and how do we use those channels to change my thinking. Because when I want to do it, I'll do it. It doesn't matter whether you've got a law or not, I'll do it.
Mr. Benson, separation of waste is very important. There's no motivation for households to separate their waste. And so why would I get 3 bins when I can use 1? Why would I separate my waste when there's no motivation? Are you thinking about motivating people to separate their waste?
Absolutely. We've already started.
Is there a program, or this is still plans yet to be rolled out?
It's not a plan. We've actually started. We've started some pilots at certain locations. Specifically, within the ministerial enclave, we have a pilot which is ongoing to source separate waste. We've also started with schools in the Osu-Klote sub-metro with one of our service providers, where we've given bins to all the basic schools for them to source separate the waste. One thing with waste separation or segregation is that once you source separate or you segregate, you need a downstream infrastructure facility
that can receive
to treat. So when you source separate or you source segregate and you don't have any means of treating the various components, then you end up putting them together. So
and our trucks designed to carry separated or segregated waste.
Oh, for the trucks
from the source.
We have a few. If you go to the developed economies, there are trucks which have different compartments to collect the different components of the waste.
But here in Ghana, we have just one.
You don't necessarily need that kind of truck to be able to collect. You can have different streams of collection vehicles to collect the different components. So that is done.
That will increase the cost of collection
Certainly.
of waste.
So waste segregation is more expensive than just putting everything together. But then, the totality of it, in the end of it, the net value or the net effect is higher economic benefit.
When you separate.
When you separate.
And then that makes it cheaper then.
I'm talking about not financial benefit, economic benefit. Because when you separate, then you have the opportunity to recycle the various components, and then you don't put them into the landfill, so you are saving on land, which is eventually an economic benefit. What we have started is the pilot that I'm talking about. We have some modest recycling facilities at certain locations where we are sending these sorted waste to. And then some of them, the PET bottles, for instance, at the moment, we don't have any treatment facility or processing facility, so we export them. We are expanding on this. If you come to my office at the Waste Management Department, for instance, we started sorting cardboards. And as I speak now, we have huge quantities there. We have identified some buyers whom we are going to sell to. And then going forward, we intend to have some partners to have a processing plant, and then we'll then process them. The ministry's vision, or let me say the national policy direction now, is to do away with waste landfilling. Because you heard the president say that the ministry or the government is acquiring 3 parcels of land for the installation of waste recycling facilities or resource utilization plants. So the sorting that we've started is going to increase once we have these downstream facilities on stream. Then we are going to expand to other parts of the city, then eventually the whole city will then become involved. So waste recycling definitely is the direction to go, and AMA is not going to be left out. We definitely are going to do that.
Well, we'll go for our last break.
And not just AMA, also the entire nation, because it's the policy of the government.
But once we decide to separate the waste, we must put the whole chain together, because then you pick the separated waste, we must be able to recycle.
Exactly, the value chain should
that's
be
critical.
complete.
Until we put that together, separating the waste will not be a good thing. Well, we'll go for a break. When we come back, we'll round up the discussion. We're looking at the sanitation situation in Ghana, whether this is just a challenge that we can deal with or it's a disaster that needs more pragmatic and drastic approach to deal with. We'll be back after this break. Yeah, welcome back. This is still Agenda on TV3. We are looking at sanitation and whether it's a challenge or it's a disaster. Doc, we usually talk about funding when it comes to dealing with waste collection and disposal and all that. How about private sector involvement? And do we always need to look at the money factor? Is that the most important factor in dealing with sanitation?
I think the issue about money, we cannot take it away completely from as a challenge. And I read the word, I'm choosing my words carefully. It's a challenge. What it means is that it is possible to deal with it. And I think as a country, our dependence on international funding, we need to actually look elsewhere for it. And I'm talking about looking internally to solve our own problems. There are very innovative ways of making money for implementation. And the first had to do, I talked to colleagues on, for instance, even every household property rates. I don't remember the last time we reviewed our property rates as a country. We can internally...
And there's even a challenge with the collection.
Exactly.
How many people are paying?
Exactly. So we should be able to solve our own problems as Ghanaians internally, instead of looking elsewhere for it. We should find innovative ways to solve our problems. I mentioned earlier that we need to make the case of the business opportunity that even waste collection, waste transportation, waste recycling, and reuse create for people. It has the potential to even inject money into our system. But we have not made the case for the business model for waste and sanitation. And so, yes, it is an easy way to say that, yeah, we don't have the money. But why don't we have the money? Because we have not made the conscious to find the money, and the money is available in the country. So
and property rate is one of them.
Property rate is just one of them, and so we need to look internally to look at innovative ways to generate money to make the system sustainable. And I need to indicate that for all these programs and regulations that we have in place, at the center of it is the issue of sustainability and funding and financing. We should have identified all the various financing opportunities that are available to us as a country and explore them.
Before I come to David, quickly, Mr. Nelson, we have this polluter pay principle. And so that is, we're supposed to be paying for the waste we generate. Are we paying enough for that waste?
People are paying, but not all. That is the direction that we are going now. Everybody is supposed to pay for the waste to be collected and treated. As I speak now, we have the various levels of payments to be made. We have the first class residential areas who are supposed to pay around 100 cedis. Then we have
per month?
Per month, yes. For per bin per month. And then we also have the middle, which is around 50 cedis, and then the base, which is the third class, between 20 and 30 cedis, depending on where you live. The challenge is there are a lot of people who are living in low-income communities who are refusing to pay. Meanwhile, waste collection service is a service which is supposed to be delivered. You cannot say this person is not paying, so I'm not going to collect his or her waste. The consequences are so daring. So it puts a lot of pressure on the assemblies. I agree with Doc that yes, we need to adopt innovative measures, and that is how come that I said earlier on that the subject matter had been attended to by way of part-time approach. Now we have the dedicated ministry. Various strategy documents are being developed. various sector players are going to be engaged right from the national level.
So moving forward, we should see some.
So the innovative measures that Doc is talking about, very soon is going to be brought to the table for us to discuss and then come up with the solutions.
We'll see some new ways of doing
exactly,
things.
for us to solve the problem once and for all. I have been reckoning that we need to determine the total cost of waste management in Ghana.
For a year or for the next how many years?
I mean,
because every
for
year
any particular time, let's determine the total cost. Let's identify the recoverable, how much the beneficiaries are supposed to pay.
AMA should know this. AMA should know how much it costs to collect waste within AMA. They should know how much they recover. They should know what the deficit is.
Over the years, what has been happening is that because of limited resources within the assemblies, each assembly will deliver what the resources can suffice. And then there is the deficit. And the deficit, the assembly will look from within and then try to supplement or subsidize. And then yet it is not sufficient. So you find some other communities which are obscured, being left out within the service chain. So some people are not getting the service at all. And that's how come that we find a lot of waste in our drains, in our gutters, which end up at the shores of the sea. And this is not acceptable.
Of course, completely unacceptable. Duncan, moving forward, what should we do to fix these issues once and for all? We know there's a big gap when it comes to providing toilets and all that. What should we do?
Thanks, Debbie. There's a massive gap. I mean, at the moment, there's over 4 million households in Ghana that needs toilets. So what's happening in Ghana with the 20,000 toilets? This week's budget speech talked about 200,000 toilets. That's just the tip of the iceberg. You know, we're talking about 20 times even what's in the budget speech. So we need to be smarter about the way we're providing this support. We know the money is actually there. At the moment, the biggest amount of money in the sector is not coming from donors, is not coming from government. It's actually already coming from householders. 400 million cedis a year is being spent on toilets in households, largely public toilets. So the private sector is already there. They know there's money.
And this is the little money people pay
every day. The private sector knows there's money there. They're already making hundreds of millions of cedis per year. So it's a matter of providing other alternatives, providing options for people to have a household toilet at the same rate that they're paying for the public toilet. And nearly every single person we talk to in our behaviour change programming says, if I can get it for the same amount I'm paying for my public toilets, I would love to have a household toilet.
The difference is that I'm sure with the Gamma program and many other programs, you need to put forward some initial capital that communities cannot afford.
The problem is that if you multiply up the Gamma project is the biggest single project we've had in the country for this sort of thing. And it's talking about 20,000 toilets. So putting up funding as a subsidy, as a capital, is not going to solve the problem. There's just not enough money. I mean, we need 200 times the Gamma projects in terms of funding to fix this problem. So it really is about using what little funding we can find available, what the government can find, what householders have got, and finding options where we can get toilets in. Designing cheaper, smarter, more...
And safer.
And safer, absolutely, and safer toilets. Helping rural communities understand you actually don't need to pay anything. You can design very, very simple toilets that are safe for no cash outlay, using locally available materials. And if you want to have something a little nicer, yes, for maybe 50 cedis or 100 cedis, you can get something much nicer that you can be proud of. And then providing them access to artisans and local volunteers who are able to provide those services because they already exist in many places.
So we have to customize this for each community.
It's about making all those connections. And where we are putting in a bit of capital money, we need to be getting more out of it than just a toilet. This is one of the biggest innovations I think we need. That when we put money into 3 or 4 households in a community, we need to be getting agreement from the community. Those of us in the community that can build our toilets, we will build our toilets. But we know until everybody in the community is using a toilet, we don't all get the benefits. Whilst even one person is defecating in the open, we know we're all at risk.
That is a demotivation for the others.
Absolutely. And everybody's also at risk in terms of health.
And that's why we need communities to buy into this and actually
Absolutely.
be the champions of this.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
very important. Dr. Chum, moving forward, what should we do in a few seconds?
I think we should adopt the attitude of yes, we can as a country, and then go for it.
Yes, we can and go for it. Samantha?
Yes, the campaign...
What should we expect from the MMDAs? AMA is the one that
yes, we are poised to take the challenge and then go at it and make sure the problem is resolved. We need the entire population on board. The campaign is saying that let's solve the sanitation challenge. Do your part. Let's clean Ghana. Everybody
but
has to get on board.
We need enforcement.
Absolutely,
That's very important,
and we are poised to enforce our bylaws to make sure people do the right thing.
There's no incentive if others can get away with it. Why can't you get away with it? But
we're not going to leave anybody outside of the net. Once you do the wrong thing, the law will catch up with you.
That's very important. And David, what would be your take home if you have to give just one sentence on what we need to do? Is it behavior change? Is it enforcement? Is it infrastructure? What should we do?
We need to be putting the effort into supporting the poorest and the most vulnerable, because in doing that, we can make sure we leave no one behind. That's the only way we're going to be able to do this for the whole country.
That's very important.
I think we should also have, we should make the system work.
We have
Our
to
systems
must work. Thank you very much, Mr. Anthony Mensah. Thank you very much, Dr. Eric Chum, and thank you very much, Mr. David Duncan. And thank you, my viewers, for being part of this discussion every Sunday. Thanks to the production team. My name is Deborah Kwabla. We all have to join this campaign to make sure that we have a safe environment. And when we have a safe environment, all of us will be beneficiaries. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and have a productive week next week. Bye.